Okay, let's unpack this. The world is buzzing about low-emission hydrogen, and for good reason.
It really
It's
is.
also called the fuel of the future, right? A critical player in decarbonizing our entire planet.
Absolutely central to the plans, yes.
But what's really interesting today, I think, is how this global shift is creating a whole new landscape, sort of a new opportunity for nations that have maybe historically been playing catch-up in industrial development.
These latecomer economies, as we call them.
Exactly. So our mission in this deep dive is to give you a shortcut, really, to getting informed on a topic that's, well, it's shaping our future. How can these nations actually seize this hydrogen opportunity? We'll explore their unique challenges, their incredible opportunities, dive into 4 distinct pathways they seem to be pursuing,
Which is fascinating in itself.
and reveal the crucial policies needed to navigate this complex, very policy-driven market. It's about more than just meeting global decarbonization targets, isn't it?
Oh, much more. It's about creating new engines for economic growth, potentially.
And hopefully avoiding the pitfalls along the way.
Yes, that's critical. And what's so fascinating here, as you mentioned, policy-driven, is that unlike past industrial revolutions, the ones sparked purely by tech innovation or market forces, this one is fundamentally policy-induced.
Right. It's different.
It's driven by a societal goal meeting planetary boundaries, not just a commercial calculation, initially at least.
So that raises a big question then.
It does. How do countries without an established innovation system, how do they leapfrog into this new economy? And what specific strategies are they actually using to manage these policy complexities and carve out their niche?
That's a crucial frame for our discussion. So, okay, let's start with the hydrogen hype itself. What exactly is low-emission hydrogen, LEH, and why is it so pivotal for decarbonization right now?
Okay, so LEH broadly covers 2 main types. First, there's green hydrogen. That's the one getting a lot of the press.
Made with renewables.
Exactly. Produced through electrolysis, using renewable energy like solar or wind to split water, H2O, into hydrogen and oxygen. It's, the cleanest form.
Okay. And the other type?
The other main one is blue hydrogen. This is made from natural gas, and this is the key part with carbon capture, storage, and use CCUS technologies.
To grab the CO2.
Right, to significantly mitigate the emissions. Now, blue hydrogen still has some emissions footprint, we should be clear.
It's not zero carbon.
Not zero, but it's often seen as more affordable currently, maybe a transitional technology on the path to green.
So hydrogen itself isn't exactly a new idea. We've used it for ages in industry. What makes it uniquely crucial for this decarbonization push?
Right.
Especially in those tricky sectors.
Yeah, its big importance now lies in tackling what we call the hard-to-abate sector.
Right, the tough ones.
These are industries where just switching to electricity, direct electrification, is really difficult, or maybe even technically impossible, or just prohibitively expensive.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Think heavy industries, iron and steel production, chemicals, cement manufacturing, and critically, long-haul transport.
Shipping and flying.
Aviation, maritime shipping, yeah. For these, LEH offers a pathway to deep decarbonization that, frankly, doesn't really exist otherwise right now.
And the scale of this ambition is just, it's huge, isn't it? What kind of global demand are we actually talking about?
The projections are truly immense. Global demand for LEH, it's expected to increase maybe tenfold by 2030, perhaps reaching about 6 million tons per year under current policies.
Which sounds like a lot, but...
But to actually meet net zero targets, we'd need something like 65 million tons annually by 2030, so a huge gap.
Wow.
The ambition is there on paper, though. We've seen announcements for about 49 million tons of annual LEH production planned for 2030 across various projects globally.
But those are just announced projects, right?
Yeah.
That's not scale in the ground, necessarily. What's the reality of this, well, this very nascent market? Why aren't more of them moving forward faster?
You've hit on a really critical point there. While lots of projects get announced, only about maybe 7% have actually reached what's called a final investment decision, or FID.
Only 7%. That's tiny.
It is. And we've seen several major hydrogen projects actually canceled recently. Off-takers, the potential buyers, they're hesitant. They don't want to commit to long-term agreements because LEH prices are still pretty high.
And uncertain.
And huge market uncertainty. Yeah, it's a market that's still very much, finding its feet.
So this isn't just an energy shift then. It sounds like a complete, almost like a rewiring of global value chains. How did that play out?
It's a fundamental transformation. You have to understand, the shift to LEH means replacing entire fossil fuel ecosystems. the whole thing.
Right.
This requires building entirely new ecosystems of firms for renewable energy generation, solar, wind, plus new carbon capture infrastructure if you're doing blue hydrogen, and completely new transport and transmission networks for the hydrogen itself.
New pipelines, new ships.
Exactly. It's a monumental change in how energy is produced, how it's moved, how it's consumed globally.
And this physically reconfigures where energy is produced and where it's used.
Absolutely. Demand is, and likely will remain, heavily concentrated in the big industrialized regions. Think USA, China, Germany, Japan, South Korea.
Okay.
Now, some of those, like the US and China, they'll probably produce a lot of their own LEH. But others, particularly in Europe and parts of Asia, they'll need to rely heavily on imports.
Ah, so that's the opening.
That's the opening. Supply is shifting potentially to these resource-rich latecomer economies, places in the Middle East and North Africa, Mennonite, Southern Africa, South America, parts of South Asia.
Got it.
Projections suggest that by 2050, maybe as much as 200 million tons out of a total 375 million tons of LEH could be transported over long distances. That's a huge potential trade flow.
An incredible opportunity for those resource-rich nations, as you say. So when we talk about latecomer economies here, what do we actually mean, and what's their specific challenge in this context?
Yeah, it's a term from development economics. A latecomer refers to countries and the firms within them that integrated into global markets later than their established competitors, the early industrializers.
All right.
These nations often lack, well-developed innovation systems. They don't always have those deep network externalities with long-standing business partners. Robust R&D capabilities can be missing.
So their traditional advantages are different.
Right. Their traditional comparative advantages have typically been things like natural resources, maybe low labor costs, not necessarily advanced manufacturing or high-tech sectors.
But there's a flip side to that sometimes, isn't there? A potential advantage of backwardness, as it's sometimes called. They don't have to invent everything from scratch.
Precisely. That's a key concept. This advantage of backwardness means they can potentially, copy successful business models from elsewhere. They can license foreign technologies. They can attract foreign direct investment, FDI, to rapidly accelerate their productivity.
Without repeating all the costly mistakes.
Without having to go through all the painful, expensive trial and error that the early industrializers did. It's a potential shortcut.
Okay, so linking back to this policy-induced nature you mentioned earlier, how does that make the hydrogen market fundamentally different from, say, the rise of the internet or previous industrial shifts?
The crucial distinction, I think, is that the push for green industries like LEH, it isn't primarily driven by its commercial superiority over existing technologies.
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Fossil fuels are often still cheaper and deeply entrenched. Instead, this whole thing is driven by a societal objective: meet planetary boundaries, decarbonize.
So governments have to step in forcefully.
Yes. Governments must actively steer investments. They have to make distinctions between, good and bad technologies from a climate perspective. And they have to proactively incentivize the phasing out of incumbent technologies that might be commercially competitive but are unsustainable.
That sounds like an absolutely immense coordination challenge, not just within a country, but globally.
It truly is. I mean, just imagine trying to build an entirely new global energy infrastructure, basically from scratch.
Yeah.
Everything from specialized pipelines, new types of ships, agreeing on international technical standards, so hydrogen made in Namibia can be used in Germany.
Right, the plumbing needs to connect.
The sheer scale and coordination required are immense, almost mind-boggling. And that's before you even get into the political tug-of-war.
What about the politics?
Globally, it's highly politically contested. You've got divergent international standards emerging, risks of carbon leakage where emissions just move elsewhere, and an increasing, frankly, subsidy race between the major economies.
China, the US, Europe.
Exactly, pouring money in. And this creates significant disadvantages for countries that simply can't afford to offer similar levels of subsidies, further complicating that tightrope walk for the latecomers we're talking about.
That tightrope walk leads us perfectly to the next question. How are these latecomer economies actually drawing up their blueprints for success? Our research points to 4 distinct strategic pathways they're pursuing. And it's interesting, many countries seem to be mixing and matching.
That's right. While countries often combine these pathways, based on their specific conditions, their existing strengths, maybe geography, our research identifies 4 primary approaches emerging from their national strategies.
Okay, let's walk through them. Let's start with number 1. the export revenue pathway.
Yeah.
What's the core idea here?
This pathway is pretty straightforward in concept. It focuses on large-scale LEH production, green or blue, with the main goal being export.
Selling it abroad.
Selling it abroad either as pure molecular hydrogen, which is tricky to transport, or more likely as easier to handle derivatives like ammonia, methanol, or synthetic fuels.
So it involves building out that whole chain.
Exactly. Production, transformation into the derivative, and the logistics for export. Industrial activities A through C in the value chain, essentially.
And what's the strategic goal for countries doing this? Is it just about selling energy?
Often it's multifaceted. For some, it's about accessing completely new international markets, like perhaps Uruguay or Namibia. For others, like Colombia or South Africa, it's partly about replacing declining fossil fuel export revenues, a crucial source of foreign exchange for them.
Makes sense. A transition strategy.
Yes. Or it could be to bridge an initial lack of domestic demand for hydrogen, or simply to capitalize on having abundant renewable resources or gas reserves, maybe more than they need domestically, like Egypt or Indonesia, perhaps.
And Namibia is an interesting case you mentioned, looking beyond just export.
Yes, Namibia is quite strategic. They're not just aiming to export hydrogen, but they're actively looking to localize the production of, say, wind turbine components alongside it, trying to build domestic industrial capacity through the export drive.
Very smart. Okay, moving on to pathway 2, the hydrogen pull pathway. This sounds intriguing, using hydrogen almost like a magnet.
It is an interesting one. This strategy aims to leverage potentially low domestic LEH costs to attract energy-intensive downstream industries.
So, encouraging factories to move to their country.
Essentially, yes, encouraging relocation from abroad. Think about sectors like producing green fertilizers using green ammonia, or maybe even green iron and steel production, which need vast amounts of energy.
So it's about making their country the go-to place for businesses that need cheap, clean energy, a competitive advantage.
Exactly. The purpose here is economic diversification. It's about reducing import dependency, especially for critical goods like fertilizers, which many developing countries import heavily. It stimulates job creation and potentially fosters a much broader green industrialization.
Any specific examples?
South Africa, for example, explicitly mentions improving its balance of payments by producing things locally that they currently import, using this hydrogen advantage. It's about creating new industrial clusters powered by clean energy.
Okay. Pathway 3 is the domestic decarbonization pathway. This seems more focused inward, less about exports or attracting foreign factories.
Correct. Here, the priority is producing LEH primarily for internal use.
Using it at home.
Yes, specifically to decarbonize their existing hard-to-abate industries and maybe transport sectors within the country itself. This could impact everything from heavy industry to, say, public bus fleets.
What's the main driver behind this internal focus? Why prioritize domestic use?
The primary motivations are usually meeting their own national climate targets, their nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, under the Paris Agreement, also reducing local air pollution, which is a huge co-benefit in many cities.
Sure.
And crucially, enabling their domestic carbon-intensive industries, steel, cement, chemicals, to remain competitive globally, as things like carbon border taxes come into play from major importers like the EU.
So it's about future-proofing their own industries.
Exactly. We see examples like focusing on heavy freight trucks or public buses in Costa Rica and Colombia, or using hydrogen for logistics vehicles at major ports like in Sri Lanka and Panama, mining trucks in Chile and South Africa, even producing cleaner shipping fuels in Panama or Egypt, or sustainable aviation fuel near hubs like the UAE.
Makes sense. Finally, pathway 4, the technological niche upgrading pathway. This sounds quite ambitious, maybe requires a different skill set.
It does. This pathway is about building capability, accumulating expertise in specific new hydrogen-related technologies or services.
Not just using hydrogen, but developing the tech.
Right. Contributing to some part of the LEH value chain itself, from AF production to end use. The ambition here can range quite a bit. It could be developing new local uses or applications within hydrogen supply chains,
Or bigger.
or developing genuinely competitive export products, becoming a technology provider on the global stage, not just a user or producer of the molecule.
Any cool examples of what these niches might look like in practice?
Absolutely. Argentina, for instance, is looking at designing smaller-scale electrolyzers, perhaps for distributed production. South Africa is exploring advanced membrane designs crucial for fuel cells and electrolyzers.
Leveraging existing strengths.
Often, yes. The UAE is building on its existing oil and gas expertise in carbon capture and storage, CCUS, to develop related hydrogen technologies. In terms of applications, India is working on hydrogen-enriched compressed natural gas (CNG) buses, and countries like India and Turkey have stated ambitions to become global suppliers of key hardware like electrolyzers and fuel cells.
It's genuinely impressive, actually, to see these varied blueprints emerging,
Right.
from aspiring global energy exporters to trying to foster these local tech powerhouses. It's clear there's no single path here,
Not at all.
which I find incredibly exciting to see unfold, actually.
Indeed, and it really highlights the versatility of LEH, doesn't it? As an energy carrier, as an industrial feedstock, nations are clearly tailoring their strategies to their unique strengths and contexts. But this also raises that really important question. How do these different pathways actually contend with the significant barriers to entry we talked about, especially for latecomers? And what specific policies are they putting in place to try and overcome them?
That's the perfect segue,
Yeah.
because it sounds like there are sort of generic barriers any country would face entering this market,
Yeah.
and then specific ones for latecomers, and even more specific ones because it's a green industry. Could you quickly break down those common hurdles?
Sure. On the generic side, these projects are just hugely capital intensive. They depend heavily on achieving economies of scale to be competitive.
Big money.
Big money, yeah. There's also significant operational and financial complexity, inconsistent regulations across borders, and still a lot of that market uncertainty we mentioned.
Okay, standard challenges for a new industry.
Hmm.
What about the latecomer-specific ones?
For latecomers, these generic issues are often compounded. They might face higher country risk premiums, which drives up their cost of financing, making projects even more expensive. There's often that general lack of domestic technological capabilities, and the sheer dominance of big multinational enterprises, MNEs, in clean tech manufacturing, can make it hard for local firms to break in or capture much value.
Limited policy space sometimes, too.
Exactly. International trade rules or investment agreements might limit their ability to use policies like local content requirements effectively. Plus, intellectual property protection can be a barrier.
And then the green-specific barriers.
On top of all that, because it's about sustainability, green industries face really strict and often fragmented environmental standards in export markets. Think about complex certification schemes to prove your hydrogen is actually green or blue.
Proving the credentials.
Yes, detailed supply chain monitoring requirements. All of this imposes high compliance costs, and latecomers might lack the regulatory or technical capacity to easily meet them.
Wow. So it's like hurdles stacked on hurdles. To tackle these multi-layered challenges, the research suggests a sort of three-tiered policy approach is needed. What does that look like?
Yeah, the idea is that successful industrial policy for latecomers trying to get into LEH needs to combine three types of policies. First, you need the basics, generic industrial policies that are needed for any industrial development. Infrastructure, skills, stable macroeconomics,
The foundations.
the foundations. Second, you need latecomer-specific policies tailored specifically to overcome those disadvantages we just talked about, risk premiums, capability gaps.
Targeted support.
Right. And third, you need green-specific policies that directly address the unique challenges of these decarbonization-driven markets, the standards, the certifications, incentivizing the switch from fossil fuels.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's maybe focus first on the most impactful policies that seem to apply across all these pathways. What are countries prioritizing as foundational?
Well, crucially, pretty much all these nations recognize they need to invest in the fundamentals. Things like financial incentives, subsidies, soft loans, and importantly, de-risking tools for these massive risky projects.
Making investors comfortable.
Exactly. Then there's building vital infrastructure, upgrading electricity grids to handle massive renewables, building pipelines, investing in skills development. Coordination is also key, setting up national hydrogen councils or similar bodies.
Getting everyone pulling in the same direction.
Yes. And a particularly strategic move we're seeing is what you might call hydrogen diplomacy.
Talking to potential buyers early.
Proactively forging bilateral partnerships, long-term agreements with potential importing nations. Countries like Chile and Namibia are being very active here, trying to secure future markets for their planned production.
Smart. That covers the sort of universal approaches. Now let's drill down into policies specific to each pathway, starting with that export revenue pathway. What policies really help attract those big foreign investments, but also ensure some local benefit?
Okay, for the export pathway, attracting that foreign direct investment, FDI, is absolutely paramount.
Hmm.
So countries focus on creating an attractive investment climate. That means things like tax concessions, maybe establishing special economic zones, SEZs.
It's free zone.
Kind of, yeah. Areas with preferential rules. Morocco and South Africa are doing this, often paired with one-stop shops for investors to cut through red tape, like in Kenya and Namibia.
Making it easy to invest.
But it's not just about attracting the capital. Smart governments are also implementing robust revenue-sharing measures. They want to ensure national benefits beyond just jobs during construction.
How do they do that?
Through things like negotiating fair land lease agreements, royalties on production, sometimes taking public equity stakes in the projects like Oman is doing, capturing value for the nation.
And the Namibia example about desalination.
Right, that was clever. Namibia apparently included requirements in their project tenders for mandatory oversizing of the desalination plants needed for electrolysis.
Why?
So the extra freshwater capacity could serve local communities, providing a direct local benefit beyond just the export-oriented hydrogen plant itself, thinking holistically.
That's really interesting. Okay, moving to the hydrogen pool pathway. How do policies differ here when the goal is attracting those energy-hungry factories?
The policies are similar in many ways to the export pathway. You still need to attract FDI, but the focus shifts. You're targeting energy-intensive and emissions-intensive downstream industries specifically.
Sure.
Chemicals, maybe auto parts, green steel.
Tailored attraction.
Yes. And there's maybe more emphasis on establishing industrial clusters. These are crucial for creating synergies, industrial symbiosis between different plants, and developing pools of skilled labor.
Like specialized zones again?
Kind of. Morocco talks about its industrial ecosystems. The UAE is planning hydrogen oases. It's also important here to harmonize green industry regulations and standards with potential investing countries to facilitate that complex cross-border trade and investment in manufacturing.
Makes sense. What about the domestic decarbonization pathway?
Yeah.
How do policies here really incentivize that shift within the country, getting local industries to adopt hydrogen?
This pathway really relies heavily on what you call green fiscal policy, meaning putting a price on carbon, either through carbon taxes like Colombia is implementing, or cap-and-trade systems where there's a limit on emissions and companies' trade permits. The UAE is exploring this.
Making pollution expensive.
Exactly. And phasing out fossil fuel subsidies is often a critical, though politically difficult, part of this. Then, to actively stimulate demand for LEH, governments use tools like issuing green bonds to finance projects.
Okay.
Using public procurement, getting state-owned enterprises like ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company in the UAE, to commit to buying hydrogen, or brokering long-term hydrogen purchase agreements.
Creating guaranteed customers.
Precisely. Pilot projects are also key here, demonstrating viability. The South Africa Hydrogen Valley Initiative is a good example of trying to kickstart multiple domestic uses in a specific region.
Right. Finally, for that ambitious technological niche upgrading pathway,
Yeah.
how do countries actively try to foster innovation and build those specialized capabilities? It seems harder.
It requires a different policy toolkit, certainly more focused on the innovation system. Policies here are really designed to build capabilities. That means investing in skills development, dedicated R&D programs, strengthening links between universities and industry.
Building the knowledge base.
Yes, and actively supporting technology startups in the hydrogen space. For innovation infrastructure, you see countries like Turkey establishing pilot facilities, maybe for testing new fuel cell designs. Argentina is creating regulatory sandboxes.
And boxes.
Yeah, controlled environments where innovative technologies can be tested under real-world conditions, but with relaxed regulations initially to speed up development. It's about nurturing that R&D ecosystem.
It's really clear, listening to all this, that these countries are thinking very strategically. They're trying to leverage their unique positions, their resources, maybe their existing industries. They're not just, waiting for the market to happen to them.
No, definitely not passively wait.
They're actively trying to shape it, to carve out a role.
That's exactly right. Which inevitably raises another important question, maybe a crucial one. With all these policies, all this ambition, what are the critical risks? What do governments really need to manage carefully to make sure these huge investments genuinely benefit their societies?
Instead of creating new problems.
Exactly, or exacerbating existing inequalities.
That's a crucial point to end on. As we wrap up this deep dive, let's just quickly recap. We've seen the immense potential of low-emission hydrogen for these latecomer economies. Explore the four main pathways they're pursuing: export, pull, domestic decarbonization, and tech upgrading, and highlighted the vital role of those tailored industrial policies.
A complex picture.
Very. But we absolutely need to address those potential pitfalls. What are the key risks that governments really need to have on their radar?
Well, based on historical experience with large resource projects and FDI, one major risk is the formation of enclaves.
Enclaves, meaning
This happens when these big, often foreign-led projects offer pretty limited technology transfer or spillovers to the local economy. Local participation might be restricted to low-value services or maybe temporary construction work.
so the wealth doesn't spread.
Right. The host country primarily benefits from, rents taxes, land leases, but there's limited broader economic upgrading or diversification. The project remains largely separate from the rest of the economy.
Okay, that's one risk.
Yeah.
And there's also the risk of shifting the burden, right? Who pays if things go wrong?
Precisely. There's a significant risk of shifting disproportionate risk onto the public sector. Think about it. State guarantees for loans, extensive subsidies, massive public investments in enabling infrastructure like roads, ports, electricity grids.
All to attract the project.
Yes, these things heavily de-risk the private investment, which is sometimes necessary, but it means private investors might capture most of the profits if things go well, while governments and taxpayers bear a large part of the financial exposure if projects fail or underperform.
Heads they win, tails we lose, potentially. And what about the political dimension? Influence.
Yeah, we also face the risk of political capture. This is where powerful actors, maybe large state-owned enterprises, or well-connected subsidiaries of multinational companies manage to secure oversized subsidies or tax exemptions that aren't genuinely necessary for the project's viability.
Using their influence.
Right, which can end up strengthening existing oligopolistic structures, distorting the market, and meaning less benefit flows to the wider public. This seems particularly relevant in the domestic decarbonization pathway, where you're often dealing with established incumbents.
Okay, so with these significant risks enclaves, shifted risk, political capture clearly in mind, what are the key strategies for success? How can latecomer nations try to genuinely maximize the gains for their societies?
To try and avoid these pitfalls, the evidence suggests there needs to be a much greater focus on policies that actively promote technology transfer incentives. It's not enough to just hope it happens.
Make it a condition.
Make it attractive, build it into agreements. And crucially, invest in strengthening the domestic absorptive capacity, the skills and institutions needed to actually learn from and utilize foreign technology.
Build the ability to learn.
Exactly. Governments also really need to enhance transparency and accountability. That means things like public disclosure of investment deals, making state-private revenue flows visible. Sunlight is often the best disinfectant, as they say.
Keep things open.
Yeah.
And ensuring the benefits are actually widely shared. How do you do that?
Yes. Implementing robust revenue-sharing policies is absolutely critical. This could take various forms, maybe mandatory community shareholdings in projects, maybe direct public ownership stakes, or mechanisms to channel export revenues transparently back to citizens, perhaps through sovereign wealth funds or targeted social programs.
So the balancing act.
It's a constant balancing act, finding ways to attract the needed foreign investment and expertise while ensuring those gains genuinely uplift their own societies and contribute to sustainable development.
It really underscores that this whole transition to a low-emission hydrogen economy,
Yeah.
it's not just about technology, is it? Or economics. It's a deeply political process.
Absolutely.
Shaped by competing national interests, global pressures, corporate strategies. For these latecomer nations, maybe the real game changer won't just be if they participate in the hydrogen boom, but how they navigate these tensions, how they manage that balancing act between attracting FDI and ensuring the benefits truly lift up their own people. So thinking about all this, what stands out to you as maybe the single biggest challenge or perhaps the most exciting opportunity for these countries as they step into this green future? Something for you, the listener, to maybe mull over.